Hi, I'm Martin Albrechtsen.
Hi guys, I'm Saido Berahino.
Hi, I'm Darren Carter.
You're listening to the Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast, where of course we're giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. We're back again for another episode reacting to the past week of Albion action. In today's episode, we'll be chatting about the Bournemouth victory and the Stoke swing on Saturday, where we lost 3-1 at the Hawthorns. And of course, we'll be chatting a little bit about what we've got to look forward to or not to look forward to in the future of our football club. But yeah, before we crack on and introduce this week's guest, make sure to subscribe on your podcast platform or YouTube, wherever you're listening from. It's great to see that you're supporting the episode in any way you can. But for today's episode, we're joined by Matt from the WBA Report Podcast, who joins us back on the show. Matt, how are you doing, mate? Welcome.
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having me on, mate. Yeah, I'm not gonna go into specifics about my feelings with Albion right now. I'm sure we'll address them later on in the episode, but I'm not too bad, thank you, mate.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on. It's been a difficult season so far, but of course, over on the WBA Report Podcast, you've been pumping out plenty of episodes. What sort of stuff do you get up to on there, and what sort of stuff can our listeners also look forward to listening to from you?
I mean, as of late, we've I think you might be able to relate to this yourself, mate. You're struggling for positives to really hammer home and talk about. So I mean, what was it? One of the most recent episodes we dished out our worst 11 of the 21st century, which it was controversial, I suppose. People like to have their say, and it definitely sparks off a few opinions and whatnot. Yeah. But that was good fun. So it's not the most positive. I mean, I think we just try to look at anything we can and try to put a positive spin on it, but there's not much I can do. I mean, the most recent episode, I was really moody. So yeah. We've got a few exciting plans for the summer, but right now, again, yeah, we're struggling, I must admit.
Yeah, it's very difficult to stay positive in what is a season like this. There are some little nuggets of positivity that we can take, but there's certainly not enough to make it consistently. But of course, it's your second appearance on the Baggies Podcast. Last time you came on and we actually won a game quite comfortably, 3-0 against Peterborough. Since then, a change of manager, a real change of mood at the Hawthorns, and a very dramatic change in league position, now sat in mid-table. Matt, how have you kind of felt things have gone since you last joined us?
Wow, where to start? That's a meaty question. I don't think things have gone very well at all. Well, I wasn't against the departure of Valérien Ismaël. I think, in fact, I was for it. However, since then, you hoped you'd get a bounce with the appointment of Steve Bruce, but it just hasn't happened. He certainly wasn't my choice to take over. I'll be interested to hear who your choice was, Louis. But it really hasn't gone well, and I think we're just in a downward spiral. And if I'm deadly honest with you, I can't see it changing. I mean, the league position reflects it all. I suppose we were third when we recorded last episode of the Peterborough win. So to find ourselves in 12th, 11th, wherever we are now it's depressing. It really is. Yeah,
the slide has been very, very fast and dramatic. I mean, it's only literally Steve Bruce has been in charge for about 8 weeks or so now, and yeah, the plummet down the league table. We were fifth when Ismaël left, and I remember talking about it, and I remember saying, "Oh no, we'll be all right. All he has to do is keep us in there." But it's been quite the opposite story. Of course, if we crack on with sort of the last week of Albion action, Matt, it's been a typical Albion week, as we come to expect of late, with dramatic swings here and there. Starting off with a fantastic 2-0 win against Bournemouth at the Hawthorns, a consecutive home victory against the top two, last time beating Fulham, but this time beating Bournemouth, who were second. It was another great performance against decent opposition, Matt, and yes, it's I suppose a typical performance we've come to expect when the big boys come to the Hawthorns.
Yeah, it certainly epitomises Albion's form, at least in recent times. I mean, from my point of view, I think beating Fulham and Bournemouth, but then losing to Blues, Blues of all teams, it only reinforces that to me, the mentality, especially in the squad and around the club, just isn't what it should be. I mean, you don't just rock up and have the talent to beat Fulham and Bournemouth, but then lose to Blues, can't beat Bristol, lose to Stoke. That doesn't make sense, does it? So something's not right in the squad and something desperately needs addressing. So yeah, for me, it only reinforces that these group of players aren't the right ones to take us forward. It's odd though, really.
Yeah, I suppose there was a sort of shining light, I guess perhaps through both of these games in the past week, and that was Andy Carroll, who especially against Bournemouth was excellent. And I think he showed up and embarrassed the previous forward line's effort and application over the previous weeks, especially against Birmingham City, I think particularly. Yeah, he was fantastic, wasn't he, Matt? He put in a warrior's performance against Bournemouth, and you could really tell that he wanted it. And as I said, put to shame some of the forwards' performances of the weeks before that.
Oh, massively, yeah. I couldn't put it back myself, really. From my point of view, I think one of the first things that Albion should look to do, whether Steve Bruce is the manager or not, is get Andy Carroll signed up for next season, because the problems that we've been addressing recently as Albion fans relate to the senior players, and you mentioned there the efforts of some in particular. And Andy Carroll is sort of the counter to that, the opposite, because he's one of the only players I really have that trust in to say it how it is and demand more of his teammates and try to maintain those levels. I think he's probably been our best player, in a long time now. At least he's one who is going to try to deliver the goods, even against Stoke. I think he was the only one who couldn't really come away with a bit of pride, I guess, or he'd at least made a contribution, I think. But you're right, against Bournemouth, he took his goal brilliantly, and he never really gave those defenders a moment's peace. I believe he played 90 minutes, didn't he, as well, which is really good for someone of Andy Carroll's, with Andy Carroll's historical injury record and fitness concerns. So yeah, honestly, for me, he's been one of our better players, and he'd definitely be signed up next season. He made an impact in the Bournemouth game, and I think he did at Stoke. We just didn't utilise him enough in that game, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of those players, I think, that it's just really baffling, because you look at the players that we've got in the squad at the moment, and some of them have been here for up to 4 or 5 years, really, in terms of probably 4 or 5 years too long, to be honest. But Andy Carroll has been here for since the end of January, and has come in and looks like a player who's been here for years and knows the club inside out, and he's putting the effort in to match that sort of love for the club. But I suppose it's a love for football that Andy Carroll's got, and that's why he's playing on what seems like a much smaller salary than most other players in the squad, and yet he's the one putting in the most drive and the most determination, and, as I said, showing up the rest of the other players. But yeah, it's a bit embarrassing, I suppose, for the rest of the squad, really, to see somebody like that come in with no affiliation to the club whatsoever. In fact, I think a lot of our fans have booed him many, many times. So I think he's come in and, as I said, shown up the rest of the squad, hasn't he, Matt?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, it's embarrassing if you're a senior player, one that's let us down in recent times. Yeah, Andy Carroll has shown them up massively. And you said it really well there. It's his love for the game, and I think his professionalism that's really shone through since he's been at the club. And interesting to hear what you think on this as well. From my point of view, he's only really one of the only Albion players that right now I sort of feel a connection to. That bond between player and supporters. Yeah, I mean, his name's has been chanted a few times, but it's strange, really. Again, he's only been here since the end of January, as you say, but there is that bond, and I think it's just all we've been asking for from the other players is what he's shown, and he's clearly well liked. It's embarrassing if I was a senior player, I was someone like Kyle Bartley, I'd be thinking, well, how come the supporters have taken to him so well, despite these results? And whilst he's played well, he's only scored 2 goals, I think, but he's made one heck of a difference. So yeah, he's really shown those other players up for sure.
Yeah, I agree, certainly. But he's definitely, I think, Gardner Hickman is probably the other exception to that, but he's the only real player I can kind of connect with at the moment. He's the only player that I've heard the name chanted of, correct me if I'm wrong, over these past few weeks. I think he's definitely the only one I've heard being chanted by the fans. So the connection that I've got with him is much greater in comparison, because I know that he's got the right mentality and the right sort of attitude that can that can take you really anywhere in this division. As we were talking off camera about teams like Luton and Huddersfield, who are really, they all might not have the sort of squad ability of an Albion side that we've got at the moment, but they've all got that right mentality. And I think Andy Carroll goes a long way to sort of matching those sorts of sides with the mentality. And as you said earlier, as you alluded to, he's kind of instilling those standards into the teammates, or trying his best to anyway. He's trying to keep them with that winning mentality. But yeah, for me, Matt, I agree. Definite another year on his contract. I'd probably even, I don't know how much exactly he's on at the moment, but I'd certainly try and give him a few extra quid just to make sure he sticks around, because I'm sure that there would be other clubs perhaps in the similar position as ourselves who would want to take him on. And I think I think we've seen some quotes earlier this week that he's hoping to stay with us. So fingers crossed he does get himself nailed down to a new contract. But the second goal, of course, was a fantastic goal from Andy Carroll. Very well taken over the top of the defence. Never thought I'd see Andy Carroll running in behind like that. I think that was a sight of a hole. But the first one was from Alex Mowat. It's his first goal since late September, where he scored against Cardiff. He got on the score sheet, and I think just like the Fulham game, it was a much improved performance from him. I think he was fairly all action in comparison to what we've come to expect from Mowat, where especially in this Stoke game, I'm sure we'll chat about later, but missing in a few of these games this season. But against Bournemouth, it was much improved from him.
Yeah, I think you just said there, his first goal since the end of September, which I knew it was a while ago, that Cardiff goal. But wow, I think it's indicative of his performances, and I suppose when he was playing well at the start of the season, so were Albion. And now, once his form's dropped off a cliff, so has ours. So it's strange, really. From what I saw, he took it. It was a really good finish, wasn't it? Really good goal, something he's capable of. From what I saw, yeah, it was an improved performance from him, as it was against Fulham. However, he's someone you alluded to there. I haven't been too impressed with at all recently, and probably someone I wouldn't be adverse to seeing leaving in the summer. But like quite a few of the players, we've got 2 years remaining on his deal, so I'm not too sure we'll be able to shift him on. Albion probably sort of the best sort of club that he could get a deal at. So it's an interesting one. But yeah, looking at the goal, took it really well, and it was an improved performance from him. But I've not been a massive fan in recent months, that's for sure.
Yeah, frustrating, I think, is the word for him, because you can see with the goals he scores, some of the games he's had, like these two against Fulham and Bournemouth. I suppose that's the same for the rest of the squad, really. But his technical ability is evident when he does get on the ball from time to time. But then there are times where he takes, a lot more frequently than not, he takes these odd decisions. He often hides. I think against Stoke, he had the chance to play quite a nice ball out to Townsend and just decided to lash the ball at the goal and dribble towards the goalkeeper. So he's one that for me is an odd one. I think sometimes a lot of the time he's missing, but then again, when he does get the ball, his decision making isn't there. I honestly can't get my head around him, but there's obviously that there is a player in there, and there's a player that we saw at Barnsley last season, but we just can't seem to squeeze it out of him, can we?
I do think it's odd. As you mentioned, that he has shown that he can have it. He sort of does have it in his locker technically, but on so many times we see him hide, as you say, or just play that easy ball down the channel, especially throughout Ismail's reign. Put it into space, knock it around the corner, let someone chase it. And from some of the goals he scores, you think, well, he's better than that. So it's a really weird one. I can't actually work out if he's a player who's, as you said, is really good technically, or he can't. He hasn't got the composure to get his head up and pick a pass, but then that's completely sort of counteracted by the fact he scores these wonderful goals, and by the looks of it, does have a good left foot. So maybe it's something that can be addressed in the summer. I'm not too sure. It's you're sort of drilling a bit of composure into him, getting his head up and playing that right pass, because it's a confusing one. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and his corners and free kicks are pretty confusing as well. I mean, from a side that looked so threatening from set pieces at the beginning of the season, we've now gone to ones where you're hoping that we don't actually get a corner because we feel like it's just going to end up in the stand or hitting the first man. And Moat unfortunately ends up taking quite a few of those corners, and his set piece delivery, I think, puts a lot of those brunt comparisons that I saw at the start of the season to absolute shame. Because his set pieces have been particularly off. But yeah, I think the defence, I think, deserve a bit of credit for that, or a lot of credit for that performance. They kept a pretty decent Bournemouth attack at bay with so many attacking options coming off the bench as well. I mean, the fact that Todd Cantwell can't get a game is pretty baffling for me. But only two real big chances for Bournemouth coming from Jamura at the back post and Dominic Solanke, pot one just wide. Matt, I think the defence probably don't come in. I suppose they will come in for a bit of flack later on in the episode when we talk about Stoke, but for large parts of the season, probably don't deserve as much discredit as possibly the rest of the group because of their sort of defensive and solidity at the back, really.
Yeah, for extended periods, we've actually been really solid in defence, and the majority of our issues stem from not being able to take our chances, especially throughout, I said, Ishmael's reign. You've seen the expected goal stats and whatnot, which I know cannot be to people's liking and can cause anger and fury. But the stats they also they explain themselves really. So from that point of view, as you're right, the defence doesn't deserve as much flack. I think again, maybe since Bruce has taken over, we've been let down by one or two errors, but in that Bournemouth game, you're sure you never really felt like they were going to score, or for a team, that was nearing on automatic promotion, or certainly as that goal. I thought the Bournemouth were poor, if I'm honest with you. I'd be interested to see what you think, because my mate Morgan Rogers is still contracted on loan at Bournemouth, but they've sent him back to train at Man City, which is a really confusing one for someone that got given one start in the league, but now is being completely frozen out. And I just completely don't understand that, because, yes, I might be slightly biased being a long-term friend of his, but, I'm looking at it and thinking, well, he started one game, scored, I think, in his last game for the club in the league away at Luton, first touch off the bench, but now he finds himself frozen out of the team. And, Bournemouth haven't been exactly, winning games for fun of recent times. I think Forest and Huddersfield and a few other teams appear to be catching up on them slightly. So, I don't really get that. But they didn't seem impressive for me. The defending was really poor for the two goals as well.
Yeah, I think Rodgers, I think a lot of Bournemouth fans say, and Fulham fans alike say, that Parker's got quite a heavy hand with a lot of the younger players. So, I can't imagine Parker to be the arm around the shoulder sort of manager that maybe a younger player might need. Of course, you'll know Morgan quite well, but I just didn't feel they had anything to pick the lot, which is amazing because of the attacking talents that they had in there. And the fact that they're sending Rodgers back says that they clearly, that Parker feels he doesn't need him, and that's quite a big statement considering all the amazing attacking talents that they do have. But I just think they didn't seem to be able to. I suppose they did create those couple of chances, but there were quite a few of those of opportunities where they were just sort of doing what we were doing against Stoke, really, which was just passing the ball between ourselves and just sideways. And I just felt that they lacked that little bit of creative edge, which is amazing considering the attacking talents and good players, good footballers that they've got in their side. I do agree they look really poor, and I think that they're in a bit of danger of. I think that Nottingham Forest are coming up quite close behind them. I think they're like 5 points behind them now with 6 games to play. So I do fear for Bournemouth if they are going to get caught at some point. But it's a baffling decision to send Morgan Rogers back. I think we could have certainly used a player like himself with the confidence to run at players this season. But that wasn't to be. But other than that, I think we didn't look too in danger of losing the league. But I think one thing I wanted to highlight was our press from goal kicks for Bournemouth. We sort of, the formation went from a three at the back with with sort of a 5 and a 2, and it went to a 3 at the back with 2 in the middle and 5 up front, because Furlong and Townsend pushed right up to their full-backs from goal kicks, and we had a lot of joy from those positions and won the ball back. It was identical to the win against Fulham, but we sort of let it go against Stoke. I didn't get that at all, because Stoke tried to play out from the back, but we did press really well and showed that we can win the ball back quite easily from those situations and really squeezed them. But yeah, it disappeared against Stoke. But yeah, Matt, what were your thoughts on sort of Steve Bruce's change, I suppose, in mentality towards these kind of playing out from the back sides?
It's interesting because, as you say, in Bournemouth, I don't think we gave them sort of like a minute's rest, did we, from goal kick? They never looked comfortable, Bournemouth, and then we're not here to talk about them, but they didn't. And Albion they played into Albion's hands, and you did ask questions within Bournemouth and from a tactical point of view there. And I suppose we can look at Steve Bruce, but you've got to think, I suppose, how well is his message getting across to the players? Is it Steve Bruce saying, okay, hang on, we're going to sit off Stoke now, even though we've sort of, again, against Bournemouth, we scored the 2 goals, and it was just like we just eased to victory, didn't we? It was that simple, really. Score 2 and just cruise it. So, what would he really change the message from A to B? I'm not too sure. So he could do, and I suppose if his message isn't getting across to the players, and that's his fault, and he needs to do something about that. But I really do think, and look at this group of players and think, well, now who's maintaining these standards here? Who's sort of saying, we've got to play, from each game we've got to hit those levels of consistency. I'm just not too sure what's gone wrong there, because it was almost the opposite. It was easy for Stoke, wasn't it? Really strange. Honestly, I've got no words. It's bamboozling, really. Yeah,
it was a typical Albion swing, really, for that 3-1 defeat. We'll move on to that now. I think the best way I've described it is it was another detestable showing, and in what I consider to be a rivalry, really. I think possibly more so than the one against Blues. I think that, a lot of history between Albion and Stoke fans, and I just felt that the standards were off it. The atmosphere was good. Numbers and atmosphere at the Hawthorns. I mean, it's the first 3 o'clock kickoff since you were last on the show. Of course, the Peterborough game is the last 3 o'clock kickoff we've had at the Hawthorns. Wow. So, I thought, considering the atmosphere, the numbers at the ground, I was really disappointed with the performance and the way the players yet again failed to live up to what was a great performance in midweek.
Yeah, honestly, I've struggled for words for the group of players and the inconsistency they're showing at the moment. You've probably hit the nail on the head there with a detestable performance, because they're so difficult to get behind and support. Honestly, it's more of a chore, if anything, because you're watching it and you're just not inspired. I'm really not too sure how you can get behind this team. And we made a point of it on the podcast fairly recently. I think it was before the Hull game, and you would have seen it yourself, mate. And an article in Athletic came out, and there were clearly coming from a source from a member of the playing staff that the the levels of toxicity from the crowd at both home and away games have been a major factor of our struggle, which is just ridiculous. I don't know how you can blame the crowd for all that, but as you said, the numbers were there, the atmosphere was there, and Stoke definitely considered the game as a rivalry from what I heard of their support. So why wouldn't you be up for the game? It's just, and I said, that's why it hits home to me that this playing squad is not right, and you shouldn't need to be motivated for games, and you shouldn't need to be, we want to show up against the big team or the good team in Bournemouth, and then we're just gonna think we can waltz to victory against Stoke. And it's I don't want to be too downbeat, so I don't want to come on and moan, but they really put you off this group of players. Honestly, it's gets to you.
They do. They grind your gears, and it's just so frustrating because, I'd have rather probably beaten Stoke than Bournemouth. I think that would have meant a lot more to Albion fans, and I think that would have probably showed a lot more to them, because I think, a rivalry victory would have been great, and to beat a side like that when the stadium's full, everybody's there, the away support giving stick all game. So, it's a nice. It would have been a nice victory, but they just didn't turn up again, and it's so annoying. As I said to you off camera, I'm thinking of going once every 2 weeks just to ensure I come on a good performance because. Yeah, it's just so annoying. I mean, the schoolboy defending, we could talk about that for the 2 quick free kicks. Jake Livermore getting his first goal of the season just in the wrong goal for the first one. And then we had...
oh, my word. When I hear them sing Captain Fantastico, I'm not knocking any of the supporters, you've got to try and generate an atmosphere, but I can't get behind that, mate.
I watched it back this morning when I woke up, and it was just the way he had about 3 touches of the ball before it ended up in the back of the net. It's
I haven't seen it back. Oh my God.
It's worth a watch back because I thought he'd just tried to put it behind for a corner and he'd ended up just diverting it the wrong side of the post. Yeah. But he's actually it's almost like he's got it caught underneath his feet and he's trying to get rid of it and he's taken about 3 and he's ended up in the back of the net with the ball. That's sort of dribbling it past Sam. So yeah, it was quite something, to be honest. I was a bit baffled because I thought I want to see that back because I was on the other end of the ground, so I couldn't quite see what I was.
Yeah, loud.
Mate?
Do you want to get some live reaction of me watching back? Just
go for it.
This is
whack it up because the way he kind of just took it round Sam was a piece of technical ability, and the same with the second one was the second goal from a free kick. It was pretty dismal.
Honestly, mate. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, I haven't seen it either. Here we go. I've got it up here.
Here we go. Matt's live reaction to Jake Livermore's first goal of the season.
Free kick. That's just awful defending, anyhow. Oh my word! What's he doing? They're like, I don't know. They're just going in a complete. They're not. It's like he's not controlling them. Someone else. It's like a FIFA goal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like when. Yeah, the second one wasn't much better, to be honest. But
I've got the second one up here now as well. Honestly, where it's just again, no one's maintaining any focus. I mean, it's a decent header, but that especially that first goal. What's he doing with his feet? I've got no idea. It was
like on FIFA when you sort of you're not controlling you're not controlling the right player. You're controlling another player in the box, and the ball comes to them, and they just dribble off in the wrong way. And Livermore, of course. I think he's been a bit more improved since his return from suspension. But that was something else. I mean, I thought it was Bartley at first, to be honest, and
that would be less of a surprise if Bartley did something like that.
Yeah, but then the second goal, I think you certainly can blame Bartley, but Bartley decided to blame others instead of himself.
Oh well, that's just typical Bartley fashion, isn't it?
His
whole time at the club.
He put his arms up and sort of looked around, and I was like, "It's your man. You've been marking him all game."
How many times could you have said that as well for a Bartley mistake or error? Since he's been at the club, always pointing. Honestly, whereas you want your sort of leader, I suppose, your organizer on that back three to be on it every second. You're one of your most experienced players. I look at someone at Wolves. I look at Connor Cody, and he's non-stop talking. You can hear it in the England games as well, and I'm sure he doesn't let that goal happen.
I look at Connor Cody. Actually, I looked at him. He made quite a big error for Wolves a few weeks ago, and the first thing he did was the hand goes in the air, and he goes, "That's my bad. That's my fault." Yeah. And that, for me, is the difference. I know it's awful to talk about a difference between a Wolves and an Albion player. I think that's always one to take with a heavy heart. But Cole Bartley, that's the difference. I think for me between a good leader and a bad one is one that takes for his errors. But there were several times in that game where he just looked so confused at the fact that his man had got the ball and he wasn't anywhere near it, and he was looking at Clark and Ajayi like, "Why weren't you marking him?" And everybody just kept going, "He's your man. Every time he's yours. He's still yours." But yeah, it's just baffling. I think Bartley needed to take responsibility for that goal, but instead decided to sort of look around and expect somebody else to come and take the flak for him. But yeah,
it's interesting. You've seen a lot of Caleb Taylor in the under 23s this year. From what I've heard and from what you said, he seems fairly highly rated. Do you think he's someone that could come into the team next year?
Yeah, I think ultimately at the moment his first team pathway is a little bit blocked because of our sort of bloated amount of centre backs. I think we must have 8 in the first team squad at the moment, including Taylor. And unfortunately, I think Taylor's probably at the bottom of that pecking order, which is annoying because I do think he looks a really good player in the middle of that back three as well, where Bartley currently plays. I think with the guidance of somebody like, Matt Clark next to him, who's looked really solid of late, I think would flourish. And as I said, he looks really comfortable in the middle. So it's just annoying that we've got, I suppose, so many centre backs. I think that's probably an area that needs to be whittled down. I think maybe in the summer with one or two of those faces going, but hopefully not Taylor, because as I said, it is his first professional season and already on the brink of a first team action. Maybe there's scope for a loan move before he gets in, and maybe see how he copes at sort of league level. But for me, he looks, I think, the next one to come out of the academy, maybe alongside Ethan Ingram, who I think Steve Bruce is a huge fan of. It's just frustrating for Taylor that there are so many centre backs ahead of him in the pecking order to choose from. But yeah, I think the big talking point for me that came out of the Stoke game was Andy Carroll again, because I think I saw a stat earlier, and I think I tweeted about it. He won 19 aerial duels in that game, which is the most out of any Championship player this season. But we just seemed to ignore him all through the game. It was like Andy Carroll was just playing on his own, and the rest of them were just like, "What's this bloke doing up front, winning all these headers? Like, what's he doing up there on his own?" But we just didn't follow in on anything that he did, Matt. It was so confusing because we did it so well against Bournemouth.
Completely. Was just about to say that. We did it so well against Bournemouth. He bullied their defenders. And let's be honest, you've got, arguably, I'd say so, probably the most effective target man in the Championship. So it's so naive not to use him. I've got no idea why. Like we hell-bent on playing this passing football, which just sees us pass it to every defender and then go backwards and go back to Bartley, then to Clark, then back across. It's just like, we're clearly not good enough to pass through teams. We haven't got one player who can unlock a defence. And that stat, I'm so glad you mentioned it, because I said to my girlfriend at the game, I said, every time we go to Andy Carroll, he's got these defenders on toast. Phil Jagielka, Harwood Bellis, and
they were quite a short back line as well, Matt.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And the goal came from a long ball to Andy Carroll into it, and eventually they got the message. And as we pushed for that sort of equaliser, and we were coming, I suppose, fairly close, Andy Carroll had a header saved, I think.
Yeah,
it just works, and it clearly works. And I don't know, it's too late now. We've got Steve Bruce as manager. We know we're not going to be passing through teams, and we're not going to start and go on a run against playing like prime Barcelona. And win games. We're not going to go. I just don't see why they're not using it. It's so naive, and it's whether it's because people and are afraid to sort of make comparisons to the Pulis days, which scarred the club massively, and scarred the supporters, that's for sure. And it's just it's not an awful idea. Just go to Andy Carroll and but your stats there justify it, mate. I'm bemused why we didn't use him more, because it was working so often. It's not. I don't think Albion fans now are in a position to say we want to be playing this beautiful football. We want to get out the Championship and quickly. And the best way to do that with Andy Carroll is use him in the most effective way, and that is playing long balls up to him and getting runners off him for sure. Yeah,
it's frustrating because I suppose his aerials he was so good in the air in that game, and he proved it with the stats. And I think just to completely just bypass him, I think maybe Steve Bruce is getting a bit stuck, because I know that Ron Gurley, who obviously sort of brought him into the club, is very keen to implement an on-the-floor playing style that Albion fans can identify with. And I don't think we care about that anymore. I think as long as we
not try in our current results.
Not in the current results. I think you just need to get some form together as quickly as you possibly can to, as we said off camera, prevent you from getting down into those lower mid tables. I think you're a bit worried about now between now and the end of the season. But I think Carroll's just such a great asset to have there. If he's in the side, you have to play to his strengths. And it was just baffling, because he won, as we said, nearly everything in the air and nearly scored it as himself later on in the game. It was a great save from the goalkeeper to keep the score in Stoke's favour. But yeah, Carroll for me has to be utilised more if he's going to play. If we're not going to play him, then fair enough, you play along the floor, because that's what your other strikers, if we want to call them, can adjust themselves to better. But Carroll, if he's in the side, you have to work with him, and he was getting really frustrated at the fact that Dean Garner, I suppose in particular, just wasn't firing in on anything that he was putting forward. And he's an interesting one. I haven't popped him in the plan, but Matt, we may as well just discuss him whilst we're on topic. Are we ever going to see that Dean Garner of old? It just feels like time is ticking for him and sort of his time in an Albion shirt, because we haven't seen that Grady of old for quite some time now.
It does, doesn't it? And I think anyone that has listened to our podcast before or knows me knows that I'm a massive Diangana fan, and I think it's that sort of nostalgia and from what we've seen previously, I'll always have that bit of affection for him. But you are right; it's beginning to get to a point where we think, well, I mean, is it almost better to cut our losses? But equally, he's sort of playing it as like a second striker against Stoke, weren't he? And I didn't really see much of him against Bournemouth, but that's not his position. It never has been, never will be. Nobody's decided to play him as a left winger?
Yeah.
And that's where he played his best football. I know professional football players should be able to maintain a level, whether they're playing on the left wing or the right wing. That can't be denied. But he's not a striker, and you can tell he's not used to making runs in behind trying to get Carroll. You want to get Diangana on the ball, creating something. He's the only sort of naturally gifted player in our team, and it just seems so, again, naive not to put him in his most effective position, where I'm sure we'll be able to provide for Andy Carroll. But we left it in a position where we've got so many centre backs, and we sort of almost have to play a back three. But it's just another. I suppose another result of some really, I'm not sure short-minded would be the word, but sort of blighted decision-making.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think Diangana, I do worry for him, because as I agree with you, I'm a massive fan, and I'm absolutely desperate to see him clamber back to the form that we've seen him have of old, really, under Bilic. But it's just really frustrating, because I think if we had a creative force in that middle of the park, like a Pereira, obviously we're never going to have a player, I don't think, in this division to the standard of him, but who's cutting in and he's bringing players towards him because he's so dangerous, and that leaves a lot of space out wide for Grady. But at the moment, when Grady's on the pitch, it's every team will think, right, he's the only player who can create in this team. Let's get three players around him. Yeah. The other ones, Malumbi, Mowat, Livermore, what are they going to do? They can't. They're not going to do anything. So let's lump on Grady and just take the ball off him every time he gets it. And ordinarily, that creates more space for other players. So if you've got three players gravitating towards Diangana, Malumbi or Mowat or Livermore, Gardner Hickman, whoever it is. But I think more in the case of the first three that I mentioned there, were the less of the ball they see is probably the better in that attacking third. We saw Malumbi having a great chance to score, but earlier on in the game, but he just decided to miss kick the ball and fall over instead, which is just typical for Albion's season so far. But later on in the game, Matt, of course, got caught off by another counter attack after scoring a goal, as we said, from a result of Andy Carroll's knockdown that he managed to win. But Johnston, rooted to the spot, I think is the phrase I'll use for that goal. The pass was played in behind, and everybody else seemed to read it, but Sam, and he didn't come off his line, and in the end gave Lewis Baker a pretty easy finish. But yeah, that does beg the question, Matt. Of course, quotes from Steve Bruce this morning saying that he's resigned to the fact that Sam Johnston is going to leave this summer. I think we all are. I think we know that's the score. Is he the one to stick in goal for the rest of the season for you, Matt, or are you hoping to see, I suppose, the rebuild start now, really, with obviously Button or Palmer coming back into the side with these remaining games to play?
Yeah, I'm certainly in the boat of giving Alex Palmer the rest of the matches to prove himself. And look at it this way: what Palmer's, I think he's 25, isn't he? Yeah. If he's not going to get a chance in the team now, then when will he? And I was saying the same thing at the start of the season when Button played the first couple of games over him. This guy's gone loan to League Two, won promotion with Plymouth, proved himself. Went to League One, got to the playoff final with Lincoln, proved himself. Then went out on loan, emergency spell with Luton, wasn't it? And then
upgraded.
He got an assist, I think. Yeah, he upgraded. Yeah, and again, So if this just doesn't show any faith in the academy, or this is probably the most obvious chance to show faith in the academy and give Palmer a go, and you're just neglecting him almost. At least give him an opportunity. I can't fathom as to why we wouldn't, especially now as any playoff dreams are well and truly dead. And for me, I'd certainly give him the first chance to prove himself over David Button as well. Obviously, you just have that faith in your academy. Yeah. And no one knows. Palmer might be a Premier League goalkeeper. He might be a League One goalkeeper, but let's give him an opportunity, because there's no better time than now. I'd really be looking to leave if I was him and he didn't get the chance.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like as well for next season that Josh Griffiths isn't in the frame of that sort of first team goalkeeper spot. It looks like he'll get another loan. Hopefully, maybe another championship one would be good for him to make that natural progression, as he's done so well with Lincoln in League One this season, unfortunately getting injured as well. But of course, Button is now in contract negotiations from what I've seen this morning. Is it Button first and Button second and Palmer first for you for now, Matt, and then sort of see how it goes? But or would you maybe like to see Griffiths come in next season in terms of the next campaign, whether that be with Bruce or with somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything from David Button to make me think that he's a goalkeeper who's good enough to help us go and win promotion. That's for sure. He's played, I think Steve Bruce mentioned he played about 150 championship games, but he's never done anything more than that, as I don't think.
No,
I wouldn't be upset if he left. I'd definitely not have him as anything more than a backup goalkeeper. It all depends what the plans are with Palmer. I suppose that then affects what we do with Griffiths, who's, again, you'll know better than me, mate. He's supposed to be really highly rated and one of the best assets we've produced from the academy. Certainly the best goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they've got faith in Griffiths, then I'd like to see him, playing in the championship, because as with Palmer, he's proved himself in League Two and League One, and that's the next natural step. But I think probably the most likely thing we will see is Griffiths head back out on loan. Hopefully with the championship team, as you say, because he's deserves the chance to go and do so. But certainly Palmer gets the go ahead before Button. Even if we hadn't seen anything from Button and he was a new signing, I just think you have that faith in your academy setup. Someone who proved himself. I said, on loan, why would you play Button ahead of Palmer? The only thing you can really justify that with is 150 championship games, and in my opinion, that's nothing much to really shout about over someone that's come from your academy and it hasn't really put a foot wrong in their career so far.
Yeah, I think Alex Palmer is definitely the one for me to start for now. Definitely until the end of the season. See what he's about. You know what Button's capable of. You've seen him a few times this season, so you've kind of got that on record if you need to maybe go back to him if Palmer just somehow proves that he's not good enough. But I can't see that happening. I can't see that he's so bad or so much worse than, I suppose, maybe even some of Johnston's form this season. I suppose, can you get, I suppose, in some aspects, can you get a lot worse than some of Johnston's errors? But I just think you give Palmer a go between now and the end of the season, see what he's about, and then if not, you revert to Button. Maybe you even bring Griffiths in, because obviously at the moment I'm in university and I go to university in Cheltenham, and one of my lecturers is Cheltenham's sort of correspondent, and he had obviously Josh Griffiths on loan the season before last, and he says that he's a really special player, and Albion see him as definitely the future of the number one spot. So you hope that maybe that's the sort of thing that you look forward to in terms of goalkeeping prospects from the academy. But for now, I think Palmer's definitely the one you've got to go with and give him a try, because as we full well know, Johnston's definitely out the door and definitely off to the Premier League, maybe whether that's second choice or first choice at a club. But yeah, I think
you'd like to imagine that the club have had a long-term plan of how we're going to integrate Griffiths into the first team. You'd like to imagine that.
You'd like to.
If the Albion of 10 years ago, I probably think we do.
But they probably
nowadays, not at all.
Nowadays, Matt, I'm doubting whether they've actually watched him so far this season, to be honest. I do worry whether they've seen any of either Palmer or Griffiths on their respective loan spells this season, to be honest.
I mean, we had Paul Terry, John Terry's brother, as loans manager.
Oh God, no!
I encourage anyone to go and read up about some of the things he's done to.
I think it was your tweet in response to, I think, Steve Madeley's, to say one Google of him realizes that he's probably not a nice person to have around. And I Googled it and I was like, right, why is he even here? But yeah.
So as a loans manager, mate, I completely compliment your view.
Yeah, I think certainly we definitely. I would doubt if they watched them this season, but I hope they have, and I hope they've seen the sort of prospects that we've got in that goalkeeping department, and don't just, I suppose, pick the easy choice, which is to put Button in. I think But yeah, of course, Project Rebuild is very much a thing that Steve Bruce is believing in. Whether he's a part of that is a different matter. Matt, do you think Steve Bruce is the man for you next season, or if so, if not, who do you think that maybe we should look to as a new manager for next season? Because it's a huge decision, and one that the club have to get right this summer, because it's the end of those parachute payments at the end of next season. So it has to be now, if ever, to make that right decision in terms of manager.
Yeah, so Steve Bruce wasn't my choice, mate. I don't think he was the choice of many fans. Who was yours?
I can't remember. I think I was verging towards a foreign sort of randomer, really, to come in and try something different. I think me and Ronan from your podcast as well came on, and it was about that time where we were resigning ourselves to a rebuild, and we were hoping just to see somebody random come in. But now I look back, maybe that's the sort of thing you do when the parachute payments are gone and you have to really start again. But at the moment, now we've got still those parachute payments, we've still got a little bit of money. I think you do have to try and plug in for a name that you'd like to see. Wayne Rooney's kind of a guy I look at now who kind of excites me. I think you've had the pleasure of being in his press conference. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, and I was really impressed by him. Really impressed. I got a lot more respect for him after that than I had done previously. He spoke really well, and he just sort of transmitted knowledge and sort of tactical nous, I guess. So I'll be behind that.
Yeah, I watched him on Sky Sports, Monday Night Football, Arsenal, Crystal Palace he was on, and he spoke very, very well tactically. And I know that Liam Rossini, who's behind him as his assistant, is a very, very good coach. So it's whether he'd come to us, because obviously we understand that Derby seem to be kind of going down at this point. I think they've kind of resigned themselves to that, which is a shame, because they're a good club with a really good fan base, and don't deserve what's happening to them as a club at the moment. But Rooney, whether he'd go for us, because obviously he rejected Everton, which is probably a big sign. So well, you do worry whether he's waiting out for maybe a bigger job in the Premier League. But otherwise, I do think you try and have a go for him, because I think he's a really good manager. Is there anybody else that you kind of look to, Matt? If I assume, well, I think we've established Steve Bruce probably. I'd like to give him a go, but I just think that I just struggle to justify the slide down the league table. I think some of the performances have been well crafted and well tactically performed, really, with Bournemouth and Fulham being the ones in mind the most. But the slide down the league table and the failure to see much of an improvement with the current squad, and I don't want to see another manager fall victim to what is a pretty abject group of players that none of us really enjoy watching at all. It's just really hard to justify. As I said, that's that slide down the league at the moment. Yeah, no,
you've put it really well there. Steve Bruce, as I'm sure many people have come on the podcast and said before me, Steve Bruce isn't the problem, is he? By all means, and he's a good man, and you'd like to give him a chance. You really would, but you just struggle to. And his remit was to get a bounce and get us at the very least in the top six, and he's failed, hasn't he? And he hasn't shown too many signs to me of turning it around. You're out on it. There's wins over Fulham and Bournemouth, who look a brilliantly drilled team, and one that could be anyone on their day. But some of these other games, I mean, just look at Saturday for an example. You don't have a clue what we're doing by the looks of it. It's just, so I can't really justify and give you too many reasons as to why I'd like to see Bruce stay around. But I suppose you can look at it from two different perspectives. Do I want Steve Bruce to remain as manager? No, he wasn't my choice in the first place. I was interestingly enough, I was in the boat of trying to convince Bilic to come back, just to give the club a lift and get the best out of our most talented player. No matter how realistic or unrealistic that was, it would have probably been the route I would have tried. But yeah, he wasn't my choice. Bruce, who would I look to in the summer? Again, I'm not too sure on names. I think, again, probably, as we were discussing beforehand, before the podcast, selling season tickets and the PR campaign and how they try to market those is going to be a big challenge. So I'd probably get someone in who can galvanise the club. And probably the best option for us at the moment is Tony Mowbray, someone who obviously has a really good relationship with the fan base. You look at his comments at the start of the season, interesting. I'm not sure if you've seen them, about how Albion fans would take to Ishmael's style of football, and he absolutely called it. He nailed it.
He said they won't be able to identify with that at all, and they won't stand for it. So He knows the fan base very well. I suppose Blackburn have been on a little bit of a slide, but they're still very much within that playoff mix and very much in with a shot of, well, possibly automatic promotion. But I think playoffs is more realistic for them.
You'd say they've overachieved, wouldn't you?
Yeah, they've still overachieved massively. I think they're a lower mid-table side. I think they're where they've got the standard of the squad, which is where we are in the league at the moment. But they're just outside the playoffs, so I think definitely playoffs is within a shout. But yeah, I think he knows the club very well. I think Bilic would be lovely to have him back. I think they just need to get an appointment in, if that's not going to be Bruce, to make sure that the fans are back on side with whatever they do. I think it just has to be very fan orientated in this opinion.
Yeah,
but I think Gawley, I think I'm sort of resigned to the fact that we will see Steve Bruce as manager next season, because he's his mate. He knows him well. They've been friends for a few years, and you just feel that it's going to be an easy option. As we said, with the number one spot for Albion next season to play Button, it's going to be very easy to keep Steve Bruce rather than let him go and rip it up with the manager and the players as well to start this rebuild. I just feel like it's the easy option to pick Bruce, and I think that's what they'll do. I don't know whether you think they'll do something different, Matt, but I could just see them doing that.
No, that's the other perspective, and I'm glad you've addressed that, because you asked me, do I think Steve Bruce will still be manager? Yes, completely. I really do. Do I want him to be manager? No, but you've mentioned that relationship there between the CEO and Steve Bruce, and that says a lot, really. What did he say? A one-man shortlist when Ishmael was sacked. I mean, that doesn't really give you too much faith, does it? You know what I mean? And that Steve Bruce's championship record can't be knocked, but I just don't think you can ignore the plight that he's overseeing. And of course, you mentioned this appointment. I do think it has to be really fan driven. I'd be interested to see what the fan base think of this, because there are times where you go against what the fans want, and you look at it from a footballing perspective, and that's most of the time completely you trust your decision makers at the club, however poor of a record they may have at Albion. But there are times where you do focus football. That's the majority. But equally, you know, Albion, well, you're a season ticket holder who goes on Saturday. What encourages you to go back to the next game and especially renew next year? Honestly, like, you know,
at the moment, there's not much.
Yeah. So again, you can't just, you know, take caution to the wind and appoint, you know, Chris Brunt as manager, but you have got to take that element of, we need to sell season tickets, we need to get that feel good factor around the club, because if the current sort of environment remains next season, I'm not sure where we're going to get. We need the Hawthorns getting back to its sort of old self, I guess, and you can't ignore that. You've got to look at the appointment, and whilst you've got to have your footballing reasons, yes, you do also have to look at suppose your checklist and what you want in your next manager, and that for me would have to be that relationship with the fans and to get to galvanise the club. And that's why I do think Tony Mowbray is probably the best option, because he's got a track record in the Championship, a style of football that Albion fans clearly took to previously.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, that relationship, you know, I think there's a bit of a desire for him to come back as well. He's out of contract in the summer.
Yeah.
And again, something you mentioned is the parachute payments. And as a club who I'd imagine financially needs to get back to the Premier League, you're not going to take massive risks on young managers or foreign managers, especially after you've been burnt with the Ishmael appointment. And you were right for mentioning it. But again, I think Tony Mowbray just ticks all boxes, and it's probably sort of the other option, I suppose, to Bruce. I can't see too many other names really appealing to the ownership, and I suppose the fans maybe for that matter. But because Albion, the board will want to win promotion. The fans obviously want someone they can get behind. It probably ticks all boxes. Yeah,
absolutely, and I think Tony Mowbray would be a really nice option personally. Out of contract in the summer, wouldn't cost you anything to take him in. It's an easy option really, as well as keeping Bruce on. I think it's just as easy to bring in Mowbray than it is to keep Steve Bruce. But if Steve Bruce is to stay, there is rumours that he'd replace. I think one of the things that he's really shocked with is the lack of physicality in the side, and I think I've seen a few rumours that he might try and replace them with bigger and bulkier sort of physical players. But which is typical. I think, Matt, we've seen enough of Steve Bruce's sides over the past, over his managerial career to know that will definitely happen if that's the case. But Matt, I think the easiest question to ask you is more less of which players should go, but which players would you keep at Albion next season if you're Ron Gourlay or you're in charge of this footballing board that's now being put in place? Who stays for you, Matt? Who stays at Albion next season?
I had this discussion on Twitter, and it's interesting. I don't think I could even reach 10 players who I'd like to see stay. So I'd definitely be looking at Taylor Gardner-Hickman for one. Andy Carroll would be my second. Daryl Dike, of course. Dara O'Shea, I suppose. Now I'm struggling again. Now I really am. And maybe I'm being a bit over dramatic, but I mean, if you're looking at that physical presence, I suppose I get, and people don't like him, and I've seen a bit of debate on Twitter. I think Semi Ajayi has been.
He's been really good. I think
he's a bit of an asset, isn't he? I think his pace in defence. I think he's always handy to have. Carlin Grant's got he's towards 15 goals in this. So you probably can't really ignore him, even though I'm not a massive fan. But I'd probably be looking to build a spine to the team in terms of possibly Palmer or Griffiths, Dara O'Shea, Gardner-Hickman, Andy Carroll, and then you sort of try to complement your players around it. I suppose you can keep Connor Townsend maybe. Mate, I'm struggling. But if Steve Bruce wants to bring in, the likes of St Maximin again, I'm not complaining there, but I'm sure it won't be, will it? Interesting that though. I thought the whole sort of idea behind Ishmael's recruitment was to get runners in, and I personally think he significantly reduced the quality of footballer we have at the club.
He seemed to have brought in the opposite of physical players, in my opinion. I think I look at Alex Mowat, who seems good technically, but as we've established, not too good with his kind of ability to get around the pitch and be a real impact everywhere, in every movement he does. But I think one that I'd like to keep if we can. I know the centre back spot is bloated at the moment. I think that's probably an area that you look to move a couple of players on. But I think Matt Clark's one that if we are to play a three at the back, I think is probably good to establish first before because I think he has looked much more comfortable in that three. But he's a player that I'd like to see stay if you can get him. And I think if Steve Bruce is, I think if Steve Bruce is in charge, I think you definitely see Matt Clark stay next season because I think you hear him talk about him. He loves him. To be fair,
he's only got one. Sorry, mate, for interrupting. I think he's only got 1 year left on his deal as well, hasn't he?
Yeah,
at Brighton, so he wouldn't cost too much. I suppose the issue there would be just making sure we cut the number of centre backs.
Yeah, I think you just have to kind of look at some of them, maybe a Kipre or even a Bartley. I think probably would have to go for me if that's the case. But yeah, ultimately there is a good spine of the team. I think you're looking at with DK Carroll, Gardner-Hickman, Dara O'Shea, Alex Palmer, Josh Griffiths in goal. I think there's a good spine. It's just, and Connor Townsend maybe I'd like to see stay, as you said, at left wing back. I think that'd be nice to see him. I think the other spots are pretty. I think you do keep. I think you kind of have to keep Livermore now because he's obviously extended that for another year because of the appearances he's made in this final season. Malumbi's obviously staying because we've seen he's reached the threshold of appearances. I suppose I think that's a fresh face in a way that's different, and I think you can see that he's got the right mentality. I think he just doesn't have I think he has everything that isn't coachable, but he doesn't have anything that is coachable in terms of technical ability, quality in the final third, that kind of thing. But I think ultimately his physical, mental sort of abilities are the bits that you can't coach are quite good. So I think maybe you could mould him into somebody that's a bit better than he is if you have a good coach in charge. And struggling other than that, to be honest, Matt. A lot of the young players, maybe Caleb Taylor, you'd like to see make more of a first team Vista things this next season. Other than that, Romain Sawyers is an interesting one, Matt. I did see your comment under, I think it's the Express and Star. You said that he'd walk into our midfield at the moment, or would be a big part of that. How do you feel about Romain Sawyers staying on another year because the contract discussions have opened with him?
Yeah, mate. As you saw that, straight into my starting 11. That's for sure. I mean, I've always been a big Sawyers fan. I love watching him at Brentford. I thought he was a brilliant player. I was delighted when he came, and I love the fact he was an Albion fan, and he sort of was rejected and then came back, proved himself. I loved all that. Hurt me to see him struggle in the Premier League. Don't think he was utilised properly, and it hurt me to see the stick he got because no one, I don't think, deserves that level of stick. Yes, I do think he was out of his depth, but so we're 99.9% of
else.
the players in that squad. Exactly. So, and for me, what Romain Sawyers is the best passer of the ball we've got at the football club. And even if that's going maybe sideways and backwards one too many times, he's just someone. He's like a glue to the ball, isn't he? And look, you're looking at, we can't keep possession nowadays. We've got no one to pass the ball to. It's just going from centre back to centre back. You mentioned Alex Mowat's hiding. Liverpool's never been a ball playing midfielder. Even if we're playing Sawyers a bit higher up, I know he did that in his Walsall days. And for me, mate, yeah, he's straight back into the team. And I do think if Steve Bruce stays, then he'll certainly be at the club.
Yeah, he Romain Sawyers for me. I love how in like a ball playing sort of six who I don't know, I guess the best comparison you can make is like a Jorginho at Chelsea who sits on the defender's toes. He keeps the ball, keeps it ticking. But I think Romain Sawyers, I think personally I think I've seen a few tweets of his saying that he prefers to play as an 8. And I do see him that way. I think although maybe doesn't have the physicality to kind of keep up with that role, I think on the ball, if you have him connecting the defence, the midfield attack together, I think he looks a lot better. And I, as you said, walks into this starting 11 right now as probably the only midfielder who's capable of, well, maybe if you excluding Darda Hickman from that last game, but Romain Sawyers walks into that midfield and he's your best ball playing midfielder in there instantly. Why he was decided to loan out with the lack of depth in midfield is a baffling decision. But then again, I do think maybe mentally that last season in the Premier League may have taken its toll on him, and obviously he suffered a racist abuse that individual has been sent down for. So I suppose Romain Sawyers mentally that might have affected him quite a lot in terms of the abuse that he received last season and the flack that he received indeed from the Albion fan base would have taken its toll on him. So maybe
I hope he wants to come back.
I hope he wants to as well, Matt, because a year on I've seen people saying, but he won't step up to the Premier League. And I think that's probably, that might be the case. And we saw last season that he wasn't utilised in the right way and wasn't good enough. But if he has the option to extend for another year and a year only, then he plays for the Championship for the next year. He might get you promoted, and at the end of it, he might leave, and that works. So Romain Sawyers, Matt, I think is a tick for me as well, definitely to extend for another year and keep in the squad, because I think he's a player with a good mentality who would, if he'd like to, stay with us another season. So, but Matt, that's Project Rebuild in a nutshell. As simple as it has been for us to talk it out, I wonder how differently things will go this summer for Albion. But Matt, it's been great having you back on the show. What can we kind of expect from the WBA Report podcast in future, and indeed yourself, if you want to plug anything yourself that you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, you follow me on Twitter at Matt Sport with an underscore on the end. I think, as I said, we've got some exciting plans for the summer. I think we've been looking at maybe a series of going back on old Albion transfer windows and getting experts on the show and trying to and discussing maybe what we can learn from those windows, what we can take into the current one. I think that's going to be really interesting and a really interesting possible series we're looking at. We ought to round up the season. I think we're trying to putting it on the back burner now, but I think we're looking at getting our end of season awards going as well. So that'll be a really interesting one. We might need your input on that one, mate. I think so. That'll be interesting. So keep an eye out there. So I'm looking forward to sort of no football going on at the moment, and it's gonna be a nice pre-season, that's for sure. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how Albion do things and yourselves at the WBA Report podcast. But as said, you can check out Matt on Twitter, links in the description, and also the podcast as well. Make sure you go and listen to the stuff that they've got going on over there, because it's been great to listen to you guys throughout this season, and hopefully next season. I hope we haven't waffled on too much. I hope I haven't waffled on too much today. There's just so much. It feels like we've covered. We've covered. A win, a defeat. The current manager, the future manager. We have got through a lot, Matt, and I loved it. Hopefully people enjoy listening to yourself over on the podcast that you do yourself. So drop a listen to them and subscribe to the WBA Report podcast if you fancy hearing more from Matt and Ronan and Kieran over there. But Matt, thank you so much for joining me, mate. It's been great to have you on again. Hopefully we can see your face on the Baggies podcast again. But mate, thank you very much for coming on. You're a star, mate. And that brings us to the end of the Baggies podcast for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Leave us a nice little rating if you've enjoyed the episode, and listening and viewing on YouTube if you haven't already. And that brings us to the end. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you again next time. Goodbye.